I think we should sell the house. My son Leo's words hung in the kitchen air, cold as the marble under my feet. His fiancée, Khloe, set a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. It's just that, Robert, she purred. It's too big for a man in your condition. The upkeep, we worry. I looked at my son, searching for the faintest flicker of pushback. This house is all I have left of your mother, I said, my voice gone rough. Leo sighed pure impatience. Dad, be realistic. You can't afford the medical bills. You're a financial burden. Burden. The word hung there, blunt, unvarnished, cruel. They didn't see a father. They saw a liability. After they left, I didn't grieve. I went to my study, opened a folder labeled evidence, and started a new audio file. My son's bride-to-be thought a wedding was coming. She didn't know an indictment was. And I was a prosecutor. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you? And where are you listening? My name is Robert Vance. For 68 years, I've believed a man's legacy isn't the numbers in his bank account, but the character he lays, brick by patient brick. I'm no CEO. I'm a football coach and a history teacher. My currency is respect the kind earned in mud and sweat on the practice field, not traded on an exchange. This house I'm sitting in is proof of that philosophy. The oak floors are warmed by 40 years of marriage, by a boy growing up, and now by an old widower's slower steps. My leather armchair sags in a familiar way and still holds the faintest trace of Sarah, my late wife. My legacy lives here, dusty photographs on the mantle, the creak in the third stair, and the memory of Leo, my son, the boy I raised into a good man. Or so I once believed. Everything began to shift with a Tuesday afternoon phone call. Leo called, and there was something different in his voice. Dad, you won't believe this, he said. Laughter pitched a shade too bright. It was the sound of a man trying to lacquer over a crack in the foundation. I met someone. Her name's Khloe. She's incredible, Dad. You have to meet her. I heard the words incredible, perfect, brilliant, but what I really heard was a new language, one of shine and spectacle I didn't speak. A small insecurity took root. I've spent a lifetime reading people the way a guard hesitates before a hit, the way a quarterback wets his lips before a big throw. In my son's voice, I heard hesitation. A few weeks later, I met her. At one of those downtown places where the menus are bound in leather and don't list prices because if you have to ask, you don't belong. I came in my best clean tweed jacket, leaning on a cane. I didn't need a prop to explain the limp I pretended came from an accident that never happened. Khloe walked in, and the air in the room seemed to change thinner, more expensive. She wore a simple white dress I knew cost a month of my pension. Her smile was flawless, engineered. It never reached her eyes. Her eyes were computers, scanning me jacket, gray hair, keying in half a heartbeat. Her hug felt hollow, a performance for the surrounding tables. Dinner was a well-rehearsed play. She asked about my teaching career with the interest of an anthropologist studying a vanished tribe. Leo looked uneasy, working to bridge two worlds that didn't meet. The real crack revealed itself at the end of the meal. Leo, darling, Khloe said, voice honeyed with the edge of steel. We should call a car for your father. A man in his condition shouldn't be dealing with public transportation at this hour. It was a velvet-gloved punch. On the surface, concern. In truth, a public declaration. She didn't just see me as old. She was repositioning me as a burden, a problem to be managed. I felt the nearby tables glance our way. It wasn't pity I saw. It was judgment. I had become an awkward detail in her perfect tableau. On the field, I taught my boys that when blindsided, you look to your teammate. I looked to Leo, my only son, the one I taught honor and loyalty. He didn't look back. He studied the geometry of a $20 kale salad as if it held the secrets of the universe. The silence that settled wasn't empty. It was weighted with his unspoken choice. In it, I heard an old order collapsing. The world I'd built for him on integrity had been traded for a costly salad and the fear of displeasing a beautiful woman. The pain in my chest was sharper than any injury, but behind it rose the coach's instinct. When an opponent shows you their play, you don't rage. You observe, you analyze, you plan the next call. When Khloe turned to signal the waiter, my hand slipped into my jacket pocket. My thumb found the small button on an old fountain pen, habit from practice days, jotting notes, charting adjustments. Tonight, in this new and foreign game, the old tool had a new purpose. A tiny red light blinked once and went dark. The game had begun, and I meant to record every snap. 6 months later, at their lavish wedding, I stood near the bar, leaning on my familiar oak cane. Khloe, radiant in a gown that cost about as much as 4 years of college, glided through the crowd. She flicked a glance my way, and for a thousandth of a second her smile dipped before resetting into something sweetly pitying. She saw a crippled old man, a poor father-in-law, a flaw in her big day like a blemish on a white carpet. She had no idea I just signed the check for the entire Vivaldi orchestra playing in the corner. She had no idea our whole relationship had been one long audition. And she certainly didn't know that my wedding gift, tucked safely in my jacket pocket, was an unedited recording of her own greed. But the story of that downfall didn't begin at the wedding. It started 6 months earlier, on a wet April morning in a downtown office that smelled of old leather and settled fortunes. I sat across from Jessica Riley. She'd been my brother David's attorney, and now, it seemed, she was mine. Her eyes are sharp, but today they held a tired kindness. She's kept the Vance family's secrets for years, and today she was about to hand me the biggest one. Robert, I'm sorry to tell you, she began in that even professional tone. David passed away last week. A sudden heart attack. I nodded, but felt none of the shock one is supposed to feel. How do you mourn a ghost? My brother vanished into the world of venture capital and Silicon Valley startups while I was diagramming plays on a chalkboard at a high school in Ohio. He built an empire out of zeros and ones. I tried to build men out of mud and sweat. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. I wondered which of us had been lonelier. Jessica slid a thick, leather-bound file across the polished mahogany desk. His will is very clear, Robert. He had no spouse or children. He left everything to you. I stared at the file. Everything? All of it, she said, with a faint hitch of someone who can hardly believe the numbers herself. The entirety of Vance's innovations, his investments, real estate, after taxes, the net value as of this morning is $83 million. $83 million. The number floated in the air between us. It didn't feel real. It was an abstraction, a string of zeros that didn't belong to my world, the Friday night lights, the modest mortgage, the slow saving for a new porch roof. Jessica must have seen the confusion on my face. Robert, are you all right? I just shook my head. It doesn't feel like money, Jessica, I said, my voice lower than usual. It feels like the ghost of every conversation we never had. I left Jessica's office and drove home in my 10-year-old Ford F-150. The truck creaked as I shifted. The seat was split in places. I looked at my calloused hands on the wheel, then at the traffic rushing past. I was an $83 million man sitting in a $5,000 pickup, emptier than I'd ever felt. Back home, I stepped through the front door and looked around. The dent in the wall where Leo, at 8, had launched a baseball. The chair where Sarah used to read, afternoon light in her hair. This house, with all its imperfections, was my real legacy. It was built with love, not tech stocks. I knew right then, the money wouldn't change me. I wasn't buying a sports car or a beach house. I wasn't changing. But standing in the quiet of that home, a cold, unsettling thought slid in. The money might not change me, but it would give me the power to make sure no one else could change my son. This windfall wasn't a gift. It wasn't an escape. It was a burden, a responsibility. It was also a loaded gun, handed to me by a ghost, and I began to consider, calmly and methodically, exactly where to aim it. A week after that fateful meeting, my phone rang again. It was Leo. This time his voice wasn't just bright, it carried a frantic edge, like he was trying to convince himself as much as deliver the news. Dad, we're engaged, he blurted. I proposed to Khloe last night. She said yes. I said all the right things. I told him how proud I was, how happy I felt, the dutiful congratulations of a father, but in my head, The coach's whistle was screaming. The game had sped up. The other side had made a decisive move, and I still didn't have a clear scheme. The very next morning, I was back in Jessica Riley's office. This time, there was no fog in me. I came with a purpose. Jessica, I began settling into the leather chair across from her. We need to talk about Khloe Sterling. She lifted an eyebrow, professional, curious. I see. What's going on, Robert? It's not one big thing, I said, lacing my fingers. It isn't a blatant betrayal or a bold-faced lie. It's subtler than that. It's 1,000 paper cuts. The way her eyes glide over the objects in my house, calculating their worth. The way she name-drops her family's powerful friends. The way she looks at me, Jessica, like I'm an inconvenient equation to solve before she can enjoy the prize. I drew a breath. Leo's engaged to her. Jessica was quiet a long moment, processing. I understand, she said at last. And you're worried. Worried is too soft a word, I answered. I'm in a game where I don't know the opponent's rulebook, but I know one rule of hers is denominated in money, which is why I'm here. I laid out my plan. Saying it aloud felt unhinged, like pitching a tawdry movie plot. I told her I wanted the $83 million kept absolutely secret. No one could know. Instead, we'd construct a new narrative. The best deceptions are built on a shard of truth, I said. The storyteller in me waking up. I have an old college knee injury. I'll say I had a minor accident on a part-time construction job, plausible enough for a retired teacher picking up extra work. It aggravated the old damage. I'll need a cane. I can't take on more hours. My pension will look thin, eaten by medical bills. I met Jessica's eyes. I will become, in Khloe's gaze, a man with a shrinking pension and rising expenses, a financial drag, a liability. I need to know, Jessica. Is she marrying my son or acquiring an asset and planning to write me off the balance sheet? Jessica listened, patient, her face unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back. As your attorney, Robert, she said carefully, I have to advise against this. It could create unforeseen legal complications. It is deception. Yes, I said, but sometimes the only way to expose the bigger lie is to stage a smaller one. She studied me for a long beat. I saw the tug of war in her eyes, the lawyer against a family friend. I watched David destroy himself, Robert, she said at last, voice dipping with regret. He built a wall of money and died alone because no one dared or cared to fight for him. I won't let that happen to Leo. She drew a breath, professionalism returning to her tone. All right, I'll help you. We'll establish a vehicle, a trust. We'll call it the Vance Family Legacy Trust. Solid and just ironic enough. It will be a fortress to protect your assets and a test, all in one. Everything stays confidential. I'll be the keeper of your secret. Relief washed through me. This wasn't a mad old man stunt anymore. It was a campaign. That evening, I went home and climbed to the attic. In the dark, dusty corner sat an old trunk of our past. I opened it. The smell of mothballs rose up. At the bottom, beside a scuffed football and a stack of yearbooks, lay an oak walking stick. It had belonged to my father. I lifted it. The wood was smooth and cool in my palm, heavier than I remembered. I stood straight, set a little of my weight on it. In the window's dim reflection, I saw an older, frailer man, a burden. Holding the cane, I didn't feel weak. I felt powerful. The script was written, the players were in costume, and the performance was about to begin. My first rehearsal took place on the number 14 bus into downtown. 40 minutes, just enough time for man to shed his old skin and slip into a role. I wasn't merely crossing neighborhoods, I was transforming. I felt the faint weight of the oak cane in my hand and taught my gait a hesitation, a twinge in the left knee. The frayed tweed jacket that had once been a quiet point of pride was now part of the costume, a signifier of decline. Aurelia was another world entirely. The air inside felt filtered through banknotes. I gave my name to the young hostess, who regarded me with polite confusion, as if a bit player had wandered onto the main set. They were already there, a family portrait framed by soft light and glittering crystal. Khloe, radiant. Leo, my son, a little tight at the edges beside her. And her parents, the Sterlings. Mr. Sterling skin-tanned, The way it gets from more hours on the golf course than in an office rose to greet me. His handshake wasn't a welcome. It was a credit check, quick and efficient. Mrs. Sterling extended a limp hand, her gaze skimming over me with the practiced indifference the wealthy reserve for waitstaff. In an instant, I'd been appraised, prized, and found lacking. Conversation at the table played like a tennis match, in which I was merely the ball boy. Aspen ski trips, a lake house renovation, an upcoming charity auction, I nodded in the right places. A courteous spectator. So, Robert, Mr. Sterling finally turned the beam of attention my way. Khloe tells us you're a teacher. Retired, I said. Taught history and coached football for 35 years. Ah, public service, he murmured, in a tone that made it sound like a chronic ailment. Mrs. Sterling added a wafer-thin smile. That must be very fulfilling. My mother was a teacher. She offered almost a human connection before glancing at her husband and falling promptly silent, as if she'd let slip a family embarrassment. But Khloe was the real assassin. She wielded politeness as a weapon. Her words were velvet-wrapped blades. You must be so proud of Leo, she said, laying a hand over my son's. From a small town in Ohio to a vice president at 32. Quite a journey. On the surface, it was praise. What I heard was the unsaid. See how your son has escaped the smallness of your life. The finishing move, her masterpiece of cruelty, arrived with dessert. As the chatter softened, Khloe turned to Leo, her voice just loud enough for neighboring tables to hear. Sweetheart, we should order an Uber Black for your dad. I don't think a man in his condition should worry about the bus at this hour. This neighborhood can be a bit much. Another hush fell, thick and awkward. Even her friends suddenly found their shoes fascinating. It was a perfect act of meanness, publicly reducing me to a helpless cripple while positioning herself as the attentive, considerate future daughter-in-law. She weaponized the room's social gaze and aimed it straight at me. I looked at Leo. This was his moment. One simple line, no need, my dad's fine. Or, he likes the bus. Anything. But my son, the boy I taught to square his shoulders and meet pressure head on, stared down at his molten chocolate cake. He nodded. A tiny nod, almost imperceptible, but heavy as a sentence. He was complicit. Again, as Khloe turned away, satisfied with her performance, and Leo reached for his phone, a cool stillness settled over me. Pain gave way to purpose. I was no longer the wounded father. I was a researcher collecting data. My thumb slid into my jacket pocket, found a familiar fountain pen. I clicked the hidden switch, a soft tick no one heard. I wanted the recording of her kind voice as she gave the driver my address. I wanted the silence in the car on the ride home. I wanted evidence of the play, of the humiliation plated on white china. The social status test had its result, and it was worse than I'd imagined. A few weeks after that fateful dinner, I decided it was time for the next move. Part of me, the co-ed coach, knew I had to raise the stakes. Another part, the husband, the father, desperately hoped I was wrong. I wanted to give her one last chance, a bridge back to our real world. That bridge sat in a worn, deep blue velvet box tucked in the back of my sock drawer. Sarah's engagement ring. It wasn't a showpiece. It was a ring bought on a teacher's salary in the 1,970 seconds, a small diamond setting a simple gold band. But Sarah wore it when she held our newborn son, when we signed the papers on this house, when we slow danced in the kitchen to some old song on the radio. The stone wasn't big, but it shone with the light of a happy life. I was about to hand Khloe a piece of our family soul. I wanted to see what she would do with it. I invited them for Saturday lunch. I made Sarah's roast chicken. I wanted this exchange to happen here, in our house, with our memories looking on. Leo relaxed, himself again in the home he grew up in. Khloe was different, polite, always polite. She praised the chicken, admired the roses. Sarah planted out back, but her eyes weren't on the flowers. They were measuring hairline cracks, scuffs on the baseboards, curtains a shade too faded. She was appraising. She saw a house, she couldn't feel a home. After we'd poured coffee, I cleared my throat. Khloe, there's something I'd like to give you. The first night, I set the little velvet box on the table between us. Leo smiled, he knew at once. For the first time all day, a flicker of genuine interest lit Khloe's eyes. She opened the box. For a beat, time hung still. I watched her polished smile stall for a split second as her eyes registered the plain setting and modest tone. But she's a professional. The mask of delight snapped back into place. Sarah wore it every day of our life together, I said quietly. It's a symbol of the love that built this family. I'd like you to have it to welcome you properly. She lifted it between two perfectly manicured fingers as if it were some curious insect. Oh, Robert, she cooed. Sweetness laid on thick. It's so classic, really lovely. Thank you. That's very thoughtful. She slid it on. On her hand, it looked small and a little lost beside the huge, soulless rock Leo had bought her. She admired it for exactly 10 seconds. I counted, then slipped it off. I'll keep it somewhere very safe, she said, snapping the lid shut with finality. As a keepsake. It just doesn't really go with, well, my style, you know? She didn't refuse the gift. She neutralized it. She turned a living piece of our family's history into a dead artifact to be put away in a box. I nodded, my own smile feeling thin and brittle. I saw Leo drop his gaze to the table, refusing to meet my eyes. He knew exactly what that ring meant. He knew the insult she just delivered. And again, he said nothing. When they were getting ready to leave, Khloe stepped onto the front porch to take an important call. I patted my pockets, pretending to hunt for my fountain pen. I happened to set it on the windowsill by the door, next to a pot of wilting geraniums. Leo, would you check the kitchen for me? I asked. As he turned away, I lingered in the hall. Believing herself unobserved, Khloe spoke to her mother. Her voice no longer sweet, slitting through the screen. You won't believe it. A tiny ring. I think the diamond's fake. He actually expected me to wear it. It's embarrassing. Leo came back empty-handed. Khloe ended the call and re-entered. The flawless smile restored. They didn't know the pen on the sill with its ultra-sensitive mic had captured every word. It wasn't a calculated trap. It was a small stroke of fate. After they left, I picked up the pen. It was warm in my hand. The ache in my chest was sharp, but beneath it something else was taking shape. Something cold, hard, and certain. I had offered her an heirloom of love, and she'd assigned it a price. The tests were finished. The collection phase was over. It was time to prepare for war. Wedding preparations moved at the pace of a military campaign. And in that campaign, my next battle unfolded on an unlikely front. A blank sheet of paper. Khloe, all efficient smiles, asked me for my guest list. So we can seat everyone properly and get the invitations out on time. Dad, she said. To her, it was logistics. To me, it was a rite. I sat at the kitchen table all afternoon, the same table where Sarah and I balanced bills and helped Leo with homework, and with a fresh fountain pen, wrote down the names of the people who built my world. Bill Donahue, the plumber who came out on Christmas Eve to fix a burst pipe and wouldn't take payment beyond a mug of hot coffee. Maria Sanchez, the high school librarian who slipped me history books she knew I loved and kept asking after Sarah for years after she died. The Garcia family at the end of the block, who shared 100 backyard cookouts with us and watched the house whenever we traveled. They weren't just names on a list. They were my footings. The family I chose. When I handed that single handwritten page to Khloe on their next visit, I was offering her not just an invitation to a wedding, but a door into my life. She took it with her usual brilliant smile. Thank you, Robert. I'll have my assistant enter this into the master spreadsheet right away. She didn't read the names. She didn't see people. She saw cells to be filled. A few days later, they stopped by. The pretext was table linen swatches, but the air carried a tension only I seemed to notice. A careful, padded silence. Make yourself at home, I said. I need to grab something in the garage. On my way out, I set my fountain pen on the hall bookshelf by the living room entrance. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but the coach in me knows some games you let run and watch from a distance. In the garage, I shuffled a few dusty boxes, making noise while my ears tilted toward the house. Paper rustled. Then Khloe's voice, not sweet, sharp, edged with disbelief. Leo, are you actually looking at this? Bill Donahue, a plumber, Maria Sanchez, a retired librarian, Hector Garcia, a mechanic? Is this a joke? Her voice dropped to a low hiss of anger. Leo, we're spending over $100,000 on this wedding. My father is inviting CEOs from his firm, business partners. This isn't a backyard barbecue. This is an investment in our brand. I am not letting some man who smells like motor oil make small talk with a federal judge. She wasn't talking about people. She was talking about props that didn't fit the staging of her show. You have to choose, Leo, she said, cold and final. Choose the life you want, the mud you came from, or the future I'm delivering. Go tell your father that due to capacity constraints, he needs to cut his list. Keep only the most appropriate names. Handle it. That Mo A axis. The silence that followed was louder than any answer. It was the sound of my son's complete surrender. I stood in the garage where I'd spent a lifetime building and fixing things with my own hands, and felt something inside me fracture, not mendable. The problem wasn't just Khloe's breathtaking condescension. It was how easily my son was willing to discard the ground he'd grown from. I took a long breath, put on a calm mask, and walked back in. They were by the door, ready to leave, their faces carefully expressionless. After they were gone, I went to the hall. I didn't pick up the pen right away. I walked to the coffee table. My list lay there. So, next to Bill's name, and Maria's, and the Garcias, the people who had held me up all my life, were tiny, razor-sharp question marks, drawn in an elegant hand with a different pen. They looked like little daggers. I turned back and picked up my fountain pen. I didn't need to play anything back. I knew it had captured all of it, the indictment of contempt, and the verdict on my son's betrayal. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you, and where are you listening? I've always believed you can learn everything you need to know about a person by the way they drive. The road, with its built-in anonymity, is a perfect stage for instinct. It shows how you handle pressure, how you treat invisible strangers, and whether you see the world as a place for cooperation or a race you have to win at any cost. Khloe treats it like a race. One Saturday, I was invited to ride along to a high-end stationery shop to approve the final proofs of the wedding invitations. One of those meaningless errands designed to make me feel included while tidying up the optics of a harmonious family. Khloe insisted we take her car. Her car, a sterile white German luxury SUV, might as well have been a mobile operating room. It was built to seal its passengers off from reality. No noise, no grit, no mess. When the heavy door thudded shut, I felt trapped inside a white bubble where Khloe alone held the controls. She drove the way she lives, seeing everyone else on the road as an obstacle to ambition. She tailgated slower cars, cut lanes without signaling, and muttered curses at drivers who had the nerve to obey the speed limit. Leo sat in the passenger seat, one hand touching the dash whenever she pulled a dangerous dart and swerved. He said nothing. He just adjusted the climate control, a silent accomplice to her recklessness. I sat in back, knuckles around my cane, feeling every jolt. My pen recorder, as usual, rested in my jacket pocket, doing its quiet work. I had a bad feeling. It happened at a busy downtown intersection. We were in the left turn lane, waiting for a gap in the oncoming torrent. The light flicked to yellow. Any sensible driver would have waited. To Khloe, it was a personal dare. We can make it, she breathed, and punched the gas. The big engine roared. We lunged into the intersection and straight into the path of a sedan barreling through, with every right to expect we'd wait. Chaos detonated. The other driver's horn screamed long, panicked, piercing. Our tires shrieked against the asphalt as Khloe stomped the brake and yanked the wheel right. The SUV shuddered hard. In back, I flew forward, my shoulder slamming into the rear of Leo's seat before snapping back. My cane clattered to the floor. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was that horn and my own pulse. Before Leo could even turn and ask if I was alright, Khloe had her script up and running. "Oh my God," she cried, voice trembling with manufactured shock. "Did you see that? Your father, he dropped that stupid cane. The noise startled me, totally threw me off. We could have died." It was a breathtaking lie, delivered with Oscar-worthy conviction. For a split second, the sheer audacity of it disoriented me. It almost worked. Then, instantly, she switched roles. "Dad, are you okay?" She twisted around, eyes wide with counterfeit concern. "Oh, your leg. I'm so sorry. See, Leo, this is what I worry about." It's not safe for him to ride with us. I'm just so concerned. In under 10 seconds, she had caused a near collision, blamed her disabled passenger, then used the incident to showcase her superior judgment and tender concern. A masterclass in manipulation. Leo, pale, looked from her to me. Mouth working, no sound coming out. Khloe pulled into the first parking lot so we could calm down. She and Leo got out, stood at the front of the car, and spoke in urgent, hushed tones. I stayed put in the back seat, saying I needed a minute. Truth was, I needed a moment for my anger to settle. The pen had captured everything, the tire scream, the horn, her lie, and the performance of concern that followed. Khloe slipped back in and slammed the door. She assumed I was lost in the fog of age and pain, not paying attention. Believing herself unobserved, she let the mask drop. She sighed, pure irritation. What a nightmare, she muttered, loud enough for the mic to catch. I can't keep carting some crippled old man around. He should just stay home before he actually causes an accident. She hadn't just insulted me. She wished me invisible. And I had it on tape. The final piece in the proof of how dangerous she really was slid into place. The rehearsal dinner was held at a private club I hadn't known existed. The kind of place steeped in the hush of old money, where thick carpets swallow sound and dark wood panels seem to murmur about seven-figure deals. I arrived on time, in the only suit I own. The event planner, a young woman with a clipboard and a permanent look of strain, glanced at me and pointed toward my seat. My spot was a physical emblem of my standing in this new world. A small round table tucked into a corner near the kitchen door, where a draft found me each time someone passed through. I was the audience in the dark, an inconvenient extra in their play. From that angle, the view was perfect. I watched the Sterling family greet CEOs and business partners with the effortless confidence of people who've never been told no. I watched my son, Leo, at the head table, laughing on cue, nodding at the right moments. He looked sharp in an expensive suit, but his eyes were empty. He was performing, and the role was wearing him down. After the main course, the speeches started. The best man offered a forgettable college anecdote. The maid of honor, Khloe's sister, read a hymn to her sister's fashion sense and ambition. Mr. Sterling rose and turned his toast into a quarterly report on his daughter's achievements. And then Khloe stood. The room went quiet. She was a queen on her stage, gathering the room with a single glance. She thanked her parents for giving her a life without limits. She thanked her friends. And then those knife-bright eyes swept the room and found me in my shadowed corner, a slow, deliberate smile. The main act was about to begin. And of course, she said, her voice ringing through the hush, I want to offer a very, very special thank you to my future father-in-law, Robert. And there you won to the boss. Every head turned. I was no longer invisible. I was the focal point. I met her gaze, my face a mask. Robert, she went on, sincerity dripping like syrup. In a world that can be too fast, too fixated on success and ambition. She gestured gracefully at the opulent room. You are a constant and powerful reminder of a simpler, humbler way of life. And for that lesson in humility, we are all so very grateful. In its own vicious way, it was brilliant. She was praising me for being poor. She was framing my life as a cautionary exhibit, a museum of mediocrity meant to make her own accomplishments gleam brighter. I saw the self-satisfied smiles on the Sterling's faces. They got the code. A few of Leo's old friends at the adjacent table stared down at their plates, newly fascinated by dessert. But the killing blow hadn't landed yet. And I want to thank you for being here tonight, she said, lifting her flute of champagne. Because while you couldn't contribute financially to this beautiful evening or to our wedding, your presence is the greatest gift of all. A reminder to Leo of just how far he's come from where he started. To Robert, polite applause crackled across the room. A photographer's flash burst white and blinding. In that split second of glare, I saw my son. His face burned with shame. His eyes were locked on the plate in front of him. He was drowning in his own humiliation, but still a prisoner to it. Then, slowly, mechanically, his arm moved. He raised his glass with the rest. In front of everyone, my son toasted the public humiliation of his father. And in that moment, the test was over. Any last hope, every brittle excuse I'd been saving for him, turned to ash. This wasn't an experiment anymore. It wasn't even revenge. What I had to do at the wedding had become an act of rescue, rescuing my son from the gilded cage he was about to step into. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my dark study, laptop open in front of me. I arranged the audio files I'd collected for months, not in chronological order, in the order of destruction. The reception hall was a masterpiece of excess. Crystal chandeliers hung like captive constellations, their light skipping across champagne flutes and diamonds. Everything was white and gold, a scene engineered for perfection, with no tolerance for flaws. After the first dance, after the 7-tier cake was cut, the eager young DJ announced it was time to hear a few words from the father of the groom. Polite applause rippled. I saw Khloe lean in to whisper to her mother. They shared a discreet, satisfied smile. They were expecting something brief and clumsy from a sentimental old man. I pushed back my chair, braced on my cane, and walked to the stage. Every step was deliberate. I could feel 200 eyes on me, some curious, some pitying. I was no longer an extra. I was the conductor of a demolition. I had come early and spoken to the DJ. I've got a little surprise. I lied smoothly. A recording of well wishes from old friends who couldn't make it. All you need to do is plug in my laptop and hit play when I give the nod. He'd been happy to oblige. I stood at the mic and let the silence settle. I looked out over the sea of waiting faces. I looked at the sterlings, monarchs of this evening. I looked at my son, Leo, a prince imprisoned in his tux. And finally, I looked at Khloe. She regarded me with patient condescension, a queen indulgently granting audience to one of her dollar subjects. Good evening, I began, my voice steady and clear through the speakers. People say marriage is built on trust, respect, and shared values. It isn't just the building of a life, it's the building of a legacy of character. Khloe's smile twitched. This was not the speech she'd ordered. My wedding gift to you both isn't crystal stemware or a honeymoon. I went on, my voice dropping. Instead, it's a kind of financial report. An audit, you might say. A recording, spoken in the only language my daughter-in-law seems to truly understand. I nodded to the DJ. Vivaldi vanished mid-phrase. A brief hiss of static inhaled the room. Then the first note of the concert sounded. Khloe's voice, cold and venom bright, ran across the dead, quiet hall. Mom, you won't believe it. The ring is tiny. I'm pretty sure the diamond's fake. He actually expects me to wear it. 200 people drew breath at once. Leo flinched as if slapped. The flawless porcelain of Khloe's face began to crack. No pause. The symphony accelerated. Her voice again, stripped down to contempt. Leo, we're spending over 100 grand on this wedding. It's an investment in our brand. I'm not letting some man who smells like motor oil make small talk with a federal judge. You have to choose, Leo. That mud life or the future I'm giving you. I glanced toward the table, where my friends, those who survived her curation, Saturday Bill, the plumber, stared into his hands. Maria, the librarian, shimmered with tears. Next came the sound of chaos. Tires screaming, a horn blaring, panic bottled and poured into the ballroom. Then Khloe's practiced lie. Oh my God, did you see that? Your father, he dropped that stupid cane. The noise startled me. I completely lost focus. And immediately after, the murmur she thought no one would ever hear. I can't keep hauling a crippled old man around. He should stay home before he causes a real accident. Now the room wasn't just silent. It was horrified. And then I brought down the hammer. Crescendo. Khloe's syrupy voice from the rehearsal dinner floated back. A judgment hung in the air. Your presence is the greatest gift of all. A reminder to Leo of just how far he's come from where he started. The recording ended. Static hissed for a heartbeat and died, leaving a silence so complete I could hear my own pulse hammering. I looked at Khloe. The perfect mask was gone, shattered to show the raw, ugly panic beneath. She looked from me to her parents, then out at the stricken faces. She was cornered, exposed, and very much alone. But it was my son's face that helped me. He sat with his head in his hands for the entire concerto. Now he lifted it, slowly. His eyes were red. He looked at the woman beside him, the woman he had just vowed to love and cherish, as if seeing her for the first time. He was no longer looking at his bride. He was looking at a stranger. The silence in the ballroom tore open, not with scandalized whispers, but with a scream. "How dare you?" Khloe shrieked, her voice raw, stripped of polish. She jabbed a shaking finger at me, her face twisted in anger, not remorse. "You've been spying on me, secretly recording me. You're a bitter, scheming, old man, and you're just jealous because you have nothing." She had just confirmed everything. In front of 200 witnesses, her last line of defense was an attack on my supposed poverty. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I simply looked to the back of the room. On cue, a woman in a dark business suit rose and walked toward the stage. Jessica Riley. She moved with quiet authority that drew every eye. She wasn't a guest. She was an officer of the court. I handed her the mic. "Good evening," Jessica said, her voice clear and commanding, cutting through the chaos. "My name is Jessica Riley, partner at Riley, Dean & Associates. I am legal counsel to Mr. Robert Vance." A fresh wave of murmurs swept the room. A family drama had become a legal proceeding. "I'm here tonight to clarify a few points," she went on, her gaze sweeping over the speechless Sterlings. "Contrary to what you've just been led to believe, my client, Mr. Vance, is not in fact destitute. As sole heir to the estate of his late brother, David Vance, my client's net worth, as of this morning, is $83 million. Another collective gasp, louder than the first. 83 million, the number hung in the air. I watched Khloe's jaw slacken, her eyes go vacant with shock. But Jessica wasn't finished. "As a wedding gift," she said, locking eyes with Khloe now, "Mr. Vance established the Vance Family Legacy Trust, initially funded with $20 million for the benefit of his son, Leo, and his new wife. For one wild heartbeat, a desperate spark of hope flared in Khloe's eyes. 20 million, a number big enough to whitewash any humiliation. Jessica saw the spark and crushed it. "However," she said, her tone turning glacial, "in light of information revealed this evening by those recordings, my client executed an amendment to the trust this afternoon. The full 20 million remains allocated to Leo Vance." She paused just long enough to let the blade find its mark. "But it is now conditioned on the legal and immediate dissolution of his marriage to Miss Khloe Sterling." The words hung there, sharp, precise, irrevocable as a judge's order. Khloe didn't faint. She collapsed. Her knees buckled and she dropped to the floor, her five-figure gown blooming around her like a parachute that failed to open. Her sobs were not grief. They were the howls of a gambler who just lost everything. The Sterlings didn't rush to their daughter. They lunged for Leo. "Leo, son, don't be hasty," Mr. Sterling hissed, clamping a hand on his almost son-in-law's arm. "It's a misunderstanding. We can fix this." But Leo didn't seem to hear. He gently shook free. He didn't look at them. He didn't look at the 20 million. He looked down at Khloe, crumpled on the floor, and I saw the final change in my son's eyes. Not anger, not pity. Disillusionment total, absolute. The woman he thought he loved, the future he thought he wanted, none of it had ever been real. And in that moment, he finally understood the true cost of silence. Slowly, he turned his back on Khloe. He turned his back on her parents. He turned his back on the counterfeit life. He looked at me across the wreckage of the ballroom. His walk from the head table to the stage felt endless. Guests parted, forming a silent aisle. He stepped past his bride without a glance, climbed the small riser, and came to stand beside me. Jessica handed him the microphone. His hand trembled. He didn't speak to the crowd. He spoke to me. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I nodded and set a hand on his shoulder. With a final nod to Jessica, I turned and stepped off the stage. Leo followed. We walked together through the ballroom, past 100 stunned faces. Behind us, chaos erupted. I heard Khloe's sobs, her father's furious shouting. I didn't look back. Outside, in the clean night air, a deep peace settled over me. I felt no triumph. I felt as if I pulled my son from a burning house. We lost everything inside, but we were alive. And that was all that mattered. Rebuilding takes longer than demolition. Our relationship would need mending, one honest brick at a time. But this time, we'd build on bedrock, on truth. The real legacy, the one made of honor and love, had been reclaimed, and that was a fight worth having. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking. Like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? The silence in the ballroom tore open, not with scandalized whispers, but with a scream. "How dare you!" Khloe shrieked, her voice raw, stripped of polish. She jabbed a shaking finger at me, her face twisted in anger, not remorse. "You've been spying on me, secretly recording me. You're a bitter, scheming old man, and you're just jealous because you have nothing." She had just confirmed everything, in front of 200 witnesses. Her last line of defense was an attack on my supposed poverty. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I simply looked to the back of the room. On cue, a woman in a dark business suit rose and walked toward the stage. Jessica Riley. She moved with quiet authority that drew every eye. She wasn't a guest, she was an officer of the court. I handed her the mic. "Good evening," Jessica said, her voice clear and commanding, cutting through the chaos. "My name is Jessica Riley, partner at Riley, Dean and Associates. I am legal counsel to Mr. Robert Vance." A fresh wave of murmurs swept the room. A family drama had become a legal proceeding. "I'm here tonight to clarify a few points," she went on, her gaze sweeping over the speechless Sterlings. "Contrary to what you've just been led to believe, my client, Mr. Vance, is not in fact destitute. As sole heir to the estate of his late brother, David Vance, my client's net worth, as of this morning, is $83 million. Another collective gasp, louder than the first. 83 million. The number hung in the air. I watched Khloe's jaw slacken, her eyes go vacant with shock. But Jessica wasn't finished. "As a wedding gift," she said, locking eyes with Khloe now, "Mr. Vance established the Vance Family Legacy Trust, initially funded with $20 million, for the benefit of his son, Leo, and his new wife." For one wild heartbeat, a desperate spark of hope flared in Khloe's eyes. 20 million, a number big enough to whitewash any humiliation. Jessica saw the spark and crushed it. "However," she said, her tone turning glacial, "in light of information revealed this evening by those recordings, my client executed an amendment to the trust this afternoon. The full 20 million remains allocated to Leo Vance." She paused just long enough to let the blade find its mark. "But it is now conditioned on the legal and immediate dissolution of his marriage to Miss Khloe Sterling." The words hung there, sharp, precise, irrevocable as a judge's order. Khloe didn't faint. She collapsed. Her knees buckled and she dropped to the floor, her 5-figure gown blooming around her like a parachute that failed to open. Her sobs were not grief, they were the howls of a gambler who just lost everything. The Sterlings didn't rush to their daughter. They lunged for Leo. "Leo, son, don't be hasty," Mr. Sterling hissed, clamping a hand on his almost son-in-law's arm. "It's a misunderstanding. We can fix this." But Leo didn't seem to hear. He gently shook free. He didn't look at them. He didn't look at the 20 million. He looked down at Khloe, crumpled on the floor, and I saw the final change in my son's eyes. Not anger, not pity. Disillusionment total, absolute. The woman he thought he loved, the future he thought he wanted, none of it had ever been real. And in that moment, he finally understood the true cost of silence. Slowly, he turned his back on Khloe. He turned his back on her parents. He turned his back on the counterfeit life. He looked at me across the wreckage of the ballroom. His walk from the head table to the stage felt endless. Guests parted, forming a silent aisle. He stepped past his bride without a glance, climbed the small riser, and came to stand beside me. Jessica handed him the microphone. His hand trembled. He didn't speak to the crowd. He spoke to me. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I nodded and set a hand on his shoulder. With a final nod to Jessica, I turned and stepped off the stage. Leo followed. We walked together through the ballroom, past 100 stunned faces. Behind us, chaos erupted. I heard Khloe's sobs, her father's furious shouting. I didn't look back. Outside, in the clean night air, a deep peace settled over me. I felt no triumph, I felt as if I'd pulled my son from a burning house. We'd lost everything inside, but we were alive, and that was all that mattered. Rebuilding takes longer than demolition. Our relationship would need mending one honest brick at a time, but this time, we'd build on bedrock on truth. The real legacy, the one made of honor and love, had been reclaimed, and that was a fight worth having.